The statement from the bank felt like a block of ice in my hands. The single line at the bottom, a punch to the gut I never saw coming. My grandchildren's trust fund, the one I'd built with 50 years of sweat and the ghost of my wife's dreams, had a balance of $47.18. It was supposed to hold nearly $500,000. My son and his wife had bled it dry for designer bags and luxury vacations, and I knew in that moment that forgiveness wasn't on the table. My first call wasn't to them. It was to my lawyer, and the first thing I did was cut them out of my will with the cold, satisfying click of a pen. You won't believe what I did next. Their carefully constructed world of lies was about to come crashing down, and I was going to be the man holding the sledgehammer. And that was just the beginning. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. Part 1. The Foundation of a Lie. There's a certain kind of quiet in a house that was once filled with a family. It's not peace, it's an absence, a hollow space where laughter used to be. For the 5 years since my Mary passed, that quiet had been my constant companion here in our small suburban Chicago home. It was a good house, a strong house. I'd built most of it myself, back when my hands were young, and my back didn't ache with the memory of every 2x4 I'd ever hoisted. My hands are different now. The skin is a roadmap of old calluses and faint, silvery scars from slipped saws and stubborn nails, the testament of a life spent building things meant to last. Mary and I, we weren't fancy people. We believed in solid foundations. We saved, we invested, and we ran a small, beloved hardware store that was the heart of our neighborhood for 3 decades. We deferred our own dreams for the sake of our son, Kevin. The big trip to see the national parks in an Airstream trailer. Maybe next year, we'd say. The little cabin by the lake in Wisconsin. Once Kevin's through college, we poured everything into him, into giving him the white-collar life we never had. He got the degree, the fancy job in finance, and the wife to match, Tiffany. Tiffany was polished. She looked like she was assembled from a catalog of modern luxury. Everything about her was sharp and angular, from her haircut to her opinions. From the moment Kevin brought her home, I could feel a subtle shift in the air. Our home, which Mary had filled with warmth and handmade quilts, was suddenly quaint in Tiffany's eyes. My life's work was a nice little hobby. She had a way of smiling that didn't quite reach her eyes, a polite condescension that made you feel like you were a charity case she was begrudgingly entertaining for the holidays. Kevin, bless his heart, was caught in her orbit. The boy who used to spend hours with me in the garage, learning to measure twice and cut once, now fidgeted uncomfortably when he visited, his eyes always darting to Tiffany for approval. He traded in his work boots for loafers that cost more than my monthly grocery bill and spoke a new language of portfolios, equity, and leveraging assets that felt alien in my ears. After Mary died, the loneliness was a physical weight. The hardware store, once a place of comfort, became a museum of her memory. Every bin of nails, every can of paint whispered her name. So I sold it. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it felt necessary. And with that money, combined with our life savings, I did the one thing Mary and I had always planned. I established a trust fund for our future grandchildren, a rock-solid, untouchable foundation for their future. College, a down payment on a house, a safety net. Nearly $500,000 managed by Kevin and Tiffany as trustees for the benefit of their children. I trusted my son. That was my first mistake. When Emily was born, and then Josh 2 years later, they became the center of my universe. They had Mary's eyes, both of them. I saw my duty as a grandfather to be a steady presence, a source of unconditional love and, when needed, financial support. But my support slowly morphed into their expectation. It started small. Dad, the water heater blew. We're a little short this month. Could you help us out? Of course I could. I wrote the check. Then it was, the property taxes are just insane this year, Frank. We're drowning. Another check. Braces for Emily, summer camp for Josh. A new transmission for Tiffany's ever-growing SUV. The requests were always framed with an air of desperation. a performance of middle-class struggle that never quite matched the reality I saw on their social media. While I was patching the elbows on my favorite flannel jacket for the third time, Tiffany was posting filtered photos from a five-star resort in Cancun, captioned with blessed and family getaway. I'd see a picture of them clinking champagne glasses on a Tuesday afternoon, and then get a call from Kevin on Friday about how they were struggling to make ends meet. The math never added up, but you make excuses for your own blood. You tell yourself they're under pressure, that this is just how the world works now. My life became a study in contrasts. I'd spend my mornings carefully portioning out my retirement funds, making sure my modest budget held, while they lived a life of casual, effortless excess funded by my generosity. And I assumed Kevin's big finance job. They moved into a sprawling McMansion in a gated community an hour away, a place with a 3-car garage and a kitchen so large you could park my 15-year-old Ford F-150 in it. They called it an investment in the kids' future. They needed to be in a good school district, they said. The implication was clear. My world, the one that had paid for their education and was now paying for their emergencies, wasn't good enough. Visits became strained. Tiffany would walk through my small home with a tight smile, her eyes scanning for dust. "Have you ever thought about updating this place, Frank? A little gray paint and some new fixtures could really increase the resale value," she'd say, as if my home was just another asset to be leveraged. They'd talk about their friends, their country club, their upcoming trip to Europe, while I'd nod along, feeling more and more like a relic from a bygone era. They never asked about me. They never asked if I was lonely or how I was managing. They only asked for things. The dark humor of it all wasn't lost on me. I found a quiet, perverse amusement in my own frugality. I'd be eating a simple bowl of soup for dinner, a recipe Mary had perfected, and I'd scroll through photos of Tiffany's $20 artisanal salad. I'd be mending a fence in my backyard, enjoying the simple satisfaction of working with my hands, and I'd get a text from Kevin asking if I could chip in for a new lawn service because their ride-on mower is on the fritz. The mower probable. Why cost more than my first car? I held my tongue for the sake of Emily and Josh. I loved those kids with a ferocity that ached. They were the last living pieces of Mary I had left. I'd babysit at a moment's notice, driving an hour each way to watch them while Kevin and Tiffany went to networking events or charity galas. I'd bring them to my home, where we'd work on projects in the garage. I taught Emily how to use a wood lathe, and her face, alight with concentration as a small bowl took shape, was worth every condescending remark from her mother. I taught Josh how to properly hammer a nail, and his triumphant shout when he finally drove one in straight was the best sound in the world. During those moments, I could almost forget the creeping unease. I could ignore the fact that my son and his wife treated me less like a father and more like an emergency fund with a pulse. I was their safety net, their backstop, the old man in the quaint house who could always be counted on to write a check. I told myself it was for the kids. That was the lie I lived with. A lie built on a foundation of my love and their greed. And like any structure with a faulty foundation, it was only a matter of time before the whole thing came crashing down. Part 2. The empty envelope. The breaking point didn't come with a thunderous crash, but with a quiet, overheard whisper. It was Emily's 10th birthday, a crisp Saturday in October. I'd spent the better part of 2 months in my workshop crafting her gift. It was a hope chest, built from solid cherry wood, with hand-cut dovetail joints and her initials, EMW, carved into the lid. It was a tradition in my family, a piece meant to last a lifetime to hold her treasures as she grew. It was heavy, solid, and real. It was everything I felt her life with her parents was not. I loaded it into the back of my truck and made the hour-long drive to their sterile, oversized house. The party was already in full swing when I arrived. The driveway was a parade of gleaming German SUVs, and the air was filled with the high-pitched laughter of children and the braying, self-congratulatory tones of suburban parents. I felt, as I always did in their world, like I was wearing the wrong costume. My work pants and clean flannel shirt were a world away from the cashmere sweaters and designer jeans that were the uniform of the day. Kevin greeted me at the door with a strained, distracted smile. "Dad, glad you could make it. Just put the gift over there with the others." He gestured toward a mountain of brightly colored paper and bows, a monument to consumerism that probably held more plastic than a landfill. I carefully carried the heavy chest inside and set it down, a piece of solid wood in a sea of disposable toys. I tried to mingle, but it was like trying to speak a foreign language. The conversations were about property values, Peloton scores, and summering in the Hamptons. I found a corner, nursed a bottle of water, and just watched. I saw Emily open my gift. Her eyes lit up as she ran her small hands over the smooth wood and traced the letters of her initials. For a moment, a genuine, unforced smile bloomed on her face. It was the only thanks I needed. But then Tiffany swooped in. "Oh, how rustic," she said, her voice dripping with manufactured sweetness. "We'll find a place for it in the basement, honey. Let's get to the new iPad from the Bradleys." She steered Emily away, leaving the chest sitting there, a forgotten heirloom. That was the first cut. The second came a few minutes later. I'd stepped out onto the back deck to get some fresh air, away from the noise. Through the sliding glass door, which was slightly ajar, I could hear Tiffany talking to one of the other mothers, a woman with a face so taut with Botox it looked like a mask. "It's just exhausting, you know," Tiffany sighed, a theatrical put-upon sound. "Having to entertain the old man. He means well, but honestly all this handcrafted junk he brings is just clutter." "I swear our basement looks like a folk art museum," the other woman laughed. "Tell me about it. My mother-in-law is the same, all sentiment, no taste." "And he just doesn't get it," Tiffany continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We're trying to gently convince him to sell his house. The market is insane right now, and frankly, we could really use the help accessing his equity to finish the pool. It's for the kids, you know. They deserve a nice place to bring their friends." The words hit me with a physical force. Accessing his equity. So that's what I was to them, not a father, not a grandfather. I was a house, an untapped asset, a piggy bank they were waiting to crack open. The quiet resolve I'd seen in my workshop, the focus I'd poured into that cherry wood chest, all of it felt naive, foolish. I felt a cold rage begin to build, a slow-burning fire in my gut. I wanted to storm in there to confront them, to see the look on their faces. But that wasn't my way. My way was to measure twice and cut once. I needed to be calm. I needed to be strategic. I walked back inside, my face a carefully composed mask of grandfatherly benevolence. It was time for the cake. As everyone sang, I pulled out the card I'd brought for Emily. Inside was a crisp $100 bill and a savings bond, a tradition Mary and I had started for Kevin when he was a boy, a way to teach the value of saving. I handed it to Emily. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." Before she could even open it, Tiffany's hand darted out and plucked the envelope from her grasp. "Oh, thank you, Frank. That's so thoughtful," she cooed, not even looking at me. "We'll just put this right into her trust fund for her. Keep it safe." And there it was, her trust fund, the fund I had created, the foundation for her future. The mention of it in that moment, combined with what I had just overheard, sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through me. A nagging doubt, a tiny little seed of suspicion that had been dormant for years, suddenly sprouted. I had observer access to the trust's online portal. I hadn't checked it in at least 2 years. I trusted my son, the financial professional, to manage it with integrity. I trusted him to honor his mother's memory. That night, back in the quiet of my own home, the silence felt different. It wasn't just hollow anymore, it was heavy with dread. I sat down at my old desktop computer, the machine humming softly in the stillness. My hands trembled slightly as I typed in the web address for the investment firm. I navigated to the client portal, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I found the login fields and entered my credentials. The page loaded. My eyes scanned past the logos and the boilerplate legal disclaimers, searching for the number. The one number that mattered. I found it in the top right corner of the screen under total account value. For a moment, my brain refused to process it. I thought it was a typo, a glitch in the system. I refreshed the page. The number remained stark and unforgiving in bold black digits. $47.18. $47.18. From nearly $500,000, the room tilted, the air left my lungs. The quiet house, my sanctuary, suddenly felt like a tomb. I was a fool, a blind, trusting fool. My sacrifices, Mary's legacy, the future I had so carefully built for my grandchildren, it had all been siphoned away, drained to nothing by the two people I was supposed to be able to trust above all others. It wasn't a mistake. It was a betrayal so profound it felt like a physical violation. The foundation had crumbled and I was standing in the rubble. Part 3, the click of the pen. The shock was a physical thing, a wave of cold that washed over me, leaving my limbs feeling heavy and useless. I stared at the screen, at that insulting, pathetic number, and felt a profound sense of dislocation, as if the last 5 years of my life had been a carefully constructed lie. The checks I'd written, the favors I'd done, the condescension I'd endured, it all replayed in my mind, but this time it was cast in the harsh, ugly light of this new reality. They weren't struggling. They were thieves. My son, my own flesh and blood, was a thief. My first instinct was primal. I wanted to smash something. I wanted to get in my truck, drive to that gaudy palace they called a home, and kick the door off its hinges. I wanted to scream, to rage, to see the fear in their eyes when they realized their kindly old cash machine had discovered the truth. But then, another feeling began to seep in, pushing past the white-hot fury. It was a cold, crystalline anger. It was the carpenter in me, the man who knew you didn't fix a rotten support beam by kicking it. You measured, you planned, and you replaced it with something stronger. Raging would give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. It would allow them to paint me as an unhinged old man. No, this would not be a shouting match. This would be a demolition. I pushed myself away from the desk, my joints cracking in protest. I walked to the liquor cabinet, a small, unassuming piece of oak I'd built for Mary years ago. In the back, behind the everyday whiskey, was a bottle of 21-year-old single malt scotch. Mary had given it to me on our last anniversary. "Save this for a truly special occasion, Frank," she'd said, her voice already thinned by her illness. I pulled it out, the weight of the bottle heavy in my hand. I twisted off the cap and poured a generous 2 fingers into a heavy crystal glass. "This qualifies, my love," I murmured into the quiet room. "This absolutely qualifies." The first sip was like fire and velvet. I took the glass back to the computer and sat down. It was time to see the rot for myself. I clicked on the Activity tab. A history of transactions appeared, a chronological ledger of their greed. My hands were steady now. The whiskey had burned away the shakes, leaving only a chilling clarity. I started scrolling back year by year. It was all there in black and white. June 2020, withdrawal $75,000. Purpose, down payment on new home. I remembered that. They'd told me they had been saving for years. Tiffany had made a pointed remark about how they believed in making their own way. August 2020, withdrawal $50,000. Purpose, luxury SUV purchase. That was the metallic gray behemoth Tiffany drove. The one she'd claimed was a surprise bonus from Kevin's job. I cross-referenced the date with her Instagram. Sure enough, there was a photo of her, sunglasses on, leaning against the hood. The caption read, "Hard work pays off. So proud of my amazing husband. Boss babe new whip." On and on it went. A digital trail of breadcrumbs leading from my grandchildren's future to their extravagant present. $15,000 for a kitchen remodel that coincided with photos of a vacation to Cabo San Lucas. $20,000 for landscaping that matched the dates of a trip to Paris. Smaller withdrawals, thousands at a time, for things labeled living expenses or investment. They weren't just taking money for emergencies. They were systematically liquidating their own children's future to fund a lifestyle they hadn't earned. The most painful part was seeing the dates. Withdrawals made just days after I had sent them money, claiming they were broke. They were double-dipping, taking from their children's trust with one hand and taking from their father with the other. The audacity of it, the sheer, contemptuous arrogance was breathtaking. I spent the entire night there, in the glow of the monitor, with the scotch as my only companion. I didn't feel grief or sadness anymore. Those emotions were a luxury I couldn't afford. What I felt was a profound, almost serene sense of purpose. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness, my quiet nature for stupidity. They had fundamentally misunderstood the man I was. I was a builder. And now I would apply those skills to dismantling their lives. By the time the sun began to cast a pale, gray light through the window, I had a plan. I printed every single page of the transaction history. I created a new folder on my desktop and began taking screenshots of Tiffany's social media posts, matching the dates of her bragging with the dates of their theft. At precisely 9 o'clock on Monday morning, I didn't call Kevin. I didn't call Tiffany. I called my lawyer. Sarah Jenkins was a woman half my age, but with a mind as sharp as a chisel. She de-handled the sale of the hardware store and helped me set up my will after Mary passed. "Frank," she said, her voice warm, "good to hear from you. I trust you're well." "I'm fine, Sarah, but I need to see you today if possible. I need to make some changes to my estate planning." "Of course," she said, a hint of concern in her voice. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is becoming clear," I said. "I'll be there in an hour." I sat across from her in her sleek, modern office, a stack of printed bank statements on the polished table between us. I explained everything, calmly and factually, from the overheard conversation to the $47.18. As she read through the documents, her professional composure cracked. Her eyes widened and a flush of anger appeared on her cheeks. "Frank, this is grand larceny," she said, her voice tight. "This is a flagrant breach of fiduciary duty. We can sue. We could even press criminal charges." I held up a hand. "Jail is too simple. Public humiliation and financial ruin, that's more fitting. But first things first. I want to change my will. Immediately." For the next hour we worked. We drafted a new last will and testament that was an ironclad fortress. My house, my savings, my pension, every last penny I possessed in the world, was to be placed into a new, irrevocable trust upon my death. The sole beneficiaries were my grandchildren, Emily and Josh. The trustee was not my son, but a neutral third-party financial institution, with Sarah acting as the trust protector. Then we added the master stroke. A single beautiful clause, drafted with Sarah's ruthless precision. "Under no circumstances shall my son, Kevin Miller, or his spouse, Tiffany Miller, be named as trustees, beneficiaries, or receive any direct or indirect financial benefit from this trust or my estate. They are hereby and for all time explicitly disinherited." Sarah printed the documents. She handed me a pen. It was a heavy, expensive-feeling pen, the kind lawyers use. I held it in my calloused hand, the cool metal a stark contrast to the worn wood of my tools. I signed my name on the designated line. The sound of the nib scratching across the paper was barely audible, but to me, it was a gunshot signaling the start of a war. I followed it with the quiet, satisfying click of the pen being capped. It was the first move. The first cut in a long and meticulous demolition. I had taken away the future they were counting on, the grand prize they assumed they'd get after I was gone, my equity. I walked out of that office not feeling angry or vengeful, but feeling something I hadn't felt in years: control. They had made their moves in the shadows with whispers and keystrokes. My first move was made in the light, legally binding and absolute, and I was just getting started. Part 4, the digital smear. For a month, I did nothing. I let the silence stretch, thin and taut like a wire. I knew my first move, disinheriting them, was a silent one. They wouldn't know about the new will until I was gone, which was a satisfaction I'd have to defer. My next move had to be a reaction to theirs. I was a fisherman who had cast his line. Now I simply had to wait for the entitled fish to bite, and bite they did. The call came on a Tuesday morning. I was in my garage, planing a piece of maple wood, the scent of sawdust filling the air. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I saw Kevin's name on the screen and felt a small, dark thrill. I let it ring a few times before answering, wiping my hands on a rag. "Hello, Kevin," I said, my voice deliberately calm and neutral. "Dad," he sounded breathless, his voice tight with a forced casualness that set my teeth on edge. "Hey, how are you doing?" "I'm fine, son, what's up?" "Well, funny story," he began, and I could already hear the gears grinding, the preamble to a request. "Tiffany and I were just looking at the finances, and you know how it is, the property tax bill just came, and it's an absolute killer this year. We're a little short. I was wondering if you could see your way to helping us out, just until my bonus comes through." It was the same script they'd used a dozen times before. The manufactured crisis, the vague promise of repayment, the underlying assumption that my money was their money. But this time, I had the transaction history of the trust seared into my brain. I knew their property taxes were paid twice a year. I also knew that 6 months prior, they had withdrawn $12,000 from the trust labeled property tax payment. They were trying to get me to pay it for them again. I took a slow breath, savoring the moment. I leaned against my workbench, the solid wood a comforting presence at my back. "I'm sorry, Kevin, I can't help you this time," I said. The words were simple, direct, and utterly alien to our dynamic. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing. What do you mean you can't?" "I mean my own finances are a bit tight right now. I'm on a fixed income, as you know. I'm having to tighten my own belt." The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a handsaw. "Tighten your belt," he stammered, his voice rising in disbelief. "Dad, you're sitting on a paid-off house. We're talking about a roof over your grandchildren's heads. And you're living in a house that's 3 times the size of mine," I replied, still calm. "If things are that tight, perhaps you should consider downsizing, or maybe Tiffany could get a job." The silence that followed was glacial. I had never, not once, spoken to him this way. I had crossed an invisible line. I could almost hear Tiffany's furious whispers in the background. I can't believe this," Kevin finally said, his voice laced with the indignation of a man who's just had his allowance cut off. "After everything we do for you." "I think you have that backwards, son," I said softly. "I have to go. The lumberyard closes at 5, and I hung up. The satisfying click of the phone ending the call was better than any whiskey. I had denied them. For the first time, I had said no. The ball was now in their court, and I knew exactly how they'd play it. It took less than 24 hours. My niece, Sarah's daughter, was the one who sent me the screenshot. She texted it to me with a single line. "Uncle Frank, what is this? Is everything okay?" It was a Facebook post from Tiffany. Her profile picture was a professionally taken shot of her, Kevin, and the kids, all dressed in matching white linen on a beach somewhere tropical. The post itself was a masterclass in passive-aggressive martyrdom. It read, "Feeling so heartbroken today. It's a terrible thing when the family you have always supported and been there for decides to turn their back on you when you need them most. Some people, especially from older generations, just don't understand the financial pressures of raising a family in today's world. All we want is the best for our kids, but it's hard when you feel so utterly alone and betrayed by those who should be your biggest supporters. Sending love to all the other parents out there doing it on their own. Family disappointment, betrayal, doing it for my kids." The post was a work of art. The vague accusations, the appeal to generational warfare, the weaponization of her children, it was all there. Underneath, the comments section was a sycophantic chorus of her friends and oblivious relatives. "Oh, Tiff, I'm so sorry you're going through this. Sending hugs. You are the strongest person I know. Don't let anyone bring you down. I can't believe some people's selfishness. You and Kevin are the most generous people I know." The hypocrisy was so potent it was almost funny. Here was a woman who had systematically stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from her own children, painting herself as a victim because her father-in-law had finally refused to give her more. Soon, the phone calls started. My sister, my cousins, old family friends, they'd all seen the post. Their voices were filled with a hesitant concern, tiptoeing around the issue. Frank, I saw Tiffany's post. Is everything okay between you and Kevin? Frank, she sounds so upset. Did something happen? To each of them, I gave the same, maddeningly calm reply. We're just having a private family disagreement. I'm sure it will all blow over. I refused to engage. I refused to defend myself on their terms. Let them gossip. Let them whisper. Let them believe Tiffany's carefully crafted narrative. An arrogant opponent always makes the most mistakes. She thought she was fighting a battle for public opinion on social media. She had no idea I was preparing for a trial, and I was gathering evidence that would make her digital smear campaign look like child's play. She was throwing pebbles, completely unaware that I was about to drop a mountain on her. Her arrogance was the greatest tool I had. Part 5, The Ledger of Sins. Tiffany's Facebook post was a declaration of war, and I was more than prepared to meet her on the battlefield. But my weapons weren't going to be vague, emotional social media posts. My weapons were going to be facts. Cold, hard, undeniable facts. I was a carpenter, and I was going to build a case against them so solid, so precisely joined, that it would be impossible for anyone to refute. The quiet anger that had settled in my bones after discovering the empty trust account now had a focus. It became a methodical, almost serene, daily ritual. Every morning, I would pour a cup of black coffee, sit down at my desk, and get to work compiling what I had started to call the Ledger of Sins. The foundation was the stack of printed bank statements from the trust, a paper monument to their greed. But that was just the skeleton. I needed to add the flesh, the context that would transform them from mere financial records into a story of breathtaking hypocrisy. My main source was Tiffany's own monumental arrogance, her Instagram account. It was public, a curated gallery of the life she wanted the world to see, a life I now knew was funded by theft. It was the prosecution's Exhibit A, and she was handing it to me herself day after day. I became an amateur digital forensic investigator. I created a spreadsheet. In the first column, I listed every significant withdrawal from the trust, date, amount, and the bogus purpose listed. In the next column, I began to painstakingly match those dates with their real-world activities. March 17, 2021, withdrawal of $18,500, purpose listed, educational expenses. My discovery. I scrolled back through Tiffany's Instagram feed. On March 22, 2021, she posted a series of pictures from a ski resort in Aspen. Photos of her and Kevin in brand new ski gear, clinking glasses of mulled wine at a lodge, the kids making a snowman. The caption, "Needed a little getaway, so important to invest in family time. Aspen making memories." I took a screenshot of every single photo and dropped it into a folder. July 2, 2022, withdrawal of $25,000. Purpose listed, home improvement loan. My discovery. On July 5, 2022, Kevin posted a photo on his Facebook page. He was standing next to a brand new, top-of-the-line jet ski on a trailer hooked to their SUV. The caption, "Time to hit the lake. Tiffany's been wanting one of these for years." I saved the photo. Then I went to the jet ski manufacturer's website and found the MSRP. It was $24,999, a perfect match. December 10, 2022, withdrawal of $8,000, purpose listed, miscellaneous. My discovery. On Tiffany's Instagram from December 12th, a photo of a new designer handbag sitting on the passenger seat of her car. A little Christmas present to myself? You deserve it. A quick Google search of the brand and style of the bag revealed its price. Just under $8,000, screenshot, saved. On and on it went, a cruise to the Bahamas. First-class tickets to New York for a weekend of shows. A massive, commercial-grade playground for the backyard that cost more than my first 2 years of college tuition. Each lavish expense, each boastful social media post, was meticulously documented and cross-referenced with a corresponding withdrawal from their children's future. I also went through my own records. I found the old checkbook registers and credit card statements. I logged every single time I had sent them money right next to their secret withdrawals. The pattern was sickening. April 5, 2023. I sent them a check for $2,000 after a panicked call from Kevin about needing a new furnace. April 3, 2023. 2 days earlier, they had withdrawn $10,000 from the trust. They didn't need a new furnace. They needed a vacation. And they got me to pay for part of it. I compiled everything into a single, thick 3-ring binder. The front page was a simple title I'd printed out, a record of fiduciary duty. It was heavy. It felt substantial in my hands. Each page was a clear plastic sleeve. On the left, the bank statement showing the withdrawal. On the right, the corresponding Instagram post, the Facebook photo, the receipt for a luxury item. It was an undeniable narrative of their deception, told in their own words and pictures. My lawyer, Sarah, was both horrified and deeply impressed when I presented it to her. She flipped through the pages, her expression hardening with each turn. "Frank, this is meticulous," she said, her voice low. "This is more than a smoking gun. This is a signed, notarized confession delivered with a fireworks display." Their defense wouldn't have a leg to stand on. "I'm not interested in a legal defense," I told her. "I'm not suing them. I don't want a judge to tell them they were wrong. I want their own world to tell them. I want to hold this up in front of everyone they've ever tried to impress and let them choke on it." Sarah leaned back in her chair, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. "A public execution. I like it." "So what's the venue for this presentation?" I already knew. There was only one place, one event, that mattered most to Tiffany's carefully constructed image of class and family values. An event where her entire clan of judgmental, affluent relatives would be gathered, expecting to celebrate their own perfection. "Thanksgiving," I said. "At her parents' house." Sarah's smile widened. "Oh, that's just brutal. I love it." For the next few weeks, I waited. I ignored the concerned calls. I let the digital smear campaign run its course. I heard through the grapevine that Tiffany was telling people I was becoming senile, that I was being manipulated by a gold-digging woman, which was so absurd it made me laugh out loud in my empty house. Let them think I was old and confused. Let them think I was weak and isolated. Their underestimation of me was the final, crucial element of my plan. They were walking into an ambush of their own making, and I had the map, the ammunition, and the patience of a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to reclaim. The ledger of sins was ready. Part 6, The Thanksgiving Reckoning. The invitation came, as I knew it would, via a stilted phone call from Kevin. Tiffany was likely standing over him, coaching him through it. They needed to maintain the illusion of being the magnanimous victims. Excluding me from Thanksgiving would raise too many questions among the extended family. Their invitation was a strategic move, a desperate hope that I had gotten over my little snit and would show up, check in hand, ready to resume my role as the family ATM. "Hey, Dad," Kevin said, his voice oozing a false sincerity that was almost physically repulsive. "The Hendersons are having everyone over for Thanksgiving, of course. We'd all really love for you to be there." "I wouldn't miss it for the world, son," I replied, my voice perfectly level. I could almost hear the sigh of relief on his end. Tiffany's parents, the Hendersons, lived in a house that made my son's place look like a starter home. It was a sprawling colonial edifice in the wealthiest part of the state, a temple of new money decorated with an almost comical lack of personal taste. Thanksgiving there was not a warm, cozy affair. It was a performance. A pageant of prosperity where Tiffany's father, a smug real estate developer named Robert, would hold court. I arrived precisely on time, not early, not late. I was dressed simply, in a clean pair of trousers and a pressed button-down shirt under a wool sweater, my uniform of quiet defiance against their world of labels and logos. I wasn't carrying a bottle of wine or a store-bought pie. My only contribution was tucked into my leather briefcase, the thick, damning weight of the ledger of sins. Tiffany greeted me at the door, her smile as brittle as a pane of glass. "Frank, I'm so glad you decided to come. We were worried about you." The lie was so effortless, so practiced. "I'm fine. Tiffany wouldn't want to disappoint your parents," I said, walking past her into the house. The dinner was exactly as I remembered. About 20 people were there. Tiffany's parents, her siblings, and their equally polished spouses, and a few family friends who orbited the Hendersons' sphere of influence. The conversation was a symphony of humblebrags about stock portfolios, Ivy League acceptances, and recent trips to Tuscany. I remained quiet, a ghost at the feast, observing, listening, and waiting. Kevin and Tiffany shot nervous glances my way throughout the meal, clearly unnerved by my placid silence. They were expecting a confrontation or a capitulation. They were not prepared for a meticulously planned execution. Finally, the moment came. The main course had been cleared and the dessert was being served. Robert Henderson, patriarch of the clan, stood at the head of the long, formal dining table, tapping his wine glass with a fork for attention. "If I could have everyone's attention," he began, beaming. "As we do every year, I'd like to offer a toast to family, to health, and to the integrity and hard work that allows us all to be here together, enjoying the fruits of our labor. We are so blessed." A smattering of polite "hear, hear" went around the table. As he raised his glass, I calmly placed my briefcase on the table, opened it, and pulled out the binder. The soft thud it made on the polished wood was the only sound in the room. Every eye turned to me. "Speaking of integrity, Robert," I said, my voice not loud, but clear and steady enough to cut through the self-congratulatory atmosphere. "I'd like to add something to that toast." Tiffany's face went pale. Kevin looked like he was about to be sick. "For the past 5 years," I began, my eyes scanning the bewildered faces around the table, "I've been helping my son and his wife. I believed I was helping them build a life to secure a future for my grandchildren. A few weeks ago, I discovered that the trust fund I established for Emily and Josh, a fund containing my life savings and the legacy of their late grandmother, has been emptied." A collective gasp went through the room. Robert Henderson lowered his glass, his expression turning from smug to thunderous. "What is the meaning of this, Frank?" he demanded. "The meaning," I said, opening the binder, "is right here." I stood up and walked slowly around the table, letting the open page face the guests. "This is a record of that trust." "And this," I said, tapping the plastic sleeve, "is a withdrawal for $75,000 made by Kevin and Tiffany for the down payment on their house. The house they told everyone they saved for on their own." I turned the page. "And this is a $50,000 withdrawal for a luxury SUV, which Tiffany claimed on social media was a bonus from Kevin's job." I looked directly at Tiffany. Her face was a mask of horror. "Your followers were very impressed, Tiffany. I've included some of their congratulatory comments here." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The evidence was doing the screaming for me. I went on page by damning page, a calm, relentless narrator of their secret life. The Aspen ski trip funded by educational expenses. The jet ski bought with a home improvement loan. The designer handbag disguised as miscellaneous. With each revelation, the atmosphere in the room grew colder, more toxic. The guests weren't looking at me anymore. They were staring at Kevin and Tiffany, whose faces had crumbled from indignant denial to sheer, cornered panic. "They did this," I continued, my voice resonating with a lifetime of suppressed frustration, "all while asking me for more money, claiming they were broke, complaining about the pressures of modern life. They stole from their own children's future to fund a fantasy, and then they had the audacity to go on social media and call me a disappointment for finally saying no." I arrived at the final section of the binder, my own bank records showing the money I had given them juxtaposed with the money they were stealing. The double dipping, the pathological lies. I closed the binder and placed it in the center of the table, right next to the untouched pumpkin pie. "So, you see, this isn't just about the money," I said, my gaze finally locking on my son. "It's about the lies. It's about the disrespect. It's about the utter contempt you've shown for me, for your children, and for the memory of your mother." I let that hang in the air for a moment. Then I delivered the final, fatal blow. "As of last month, you are both explicitly and permanently disinherited from my will," I announced to the silent room. "My entire estate, including my house and all my savings, will go into a new, protected trust for Emily and Josh." a trust that you will never, ever be able to touch. You wanted to access my equity? Well, you can't. You will not see another dime from me for the rest of your lives. You are on your own." I looked at Tiffany's parents. Their faces were etched with a fury that was born not of moral outrage, but of profound social humiliation. Their perfect daughter and her husband had been exposed as common thieves in front of their entire social circle. My work was done. I hadn't yelled, I hadn't sworn, I had simply presented the facts. I had built a case, and now I was resting it. I picked up my briefcase, leaving the ledger of sins on the table as a parting gift. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said to the room of stunned statues. And then I turned and walked out the door, leaving behind the smoking crater where their perfect, curated lives used to be. The cool night air had never felt so clean. Part 7, The Taste of Freedom. The drive home from the Hendersons was the quietest, most peaceful hour I had spent in years. I didn't turn on the radio. I just listened to the hum of my truck's engine on the highway, a steady, reliable sound. I felt no rage, no lingering bitterness. I felt light. A tremendous weight, when I hadn't even fully realized I was carrying, had been lifted. I had spoken the truth, and the truth had done its work. The fallout was, as Sarah the lawyer would later describe it, swift and apocalyptic. My niece called me the next day, her voice a mixture of shock and awe. Apparently, my exit was followed by a screaming match of epic proportions. Robert Henderson, whose entire identity was built on his reputation for business integrity, was apoplectic with shame. He saw Kevin and Tiffany not just as bad parents, but as a catastrophic liability to the family brand. Before the weekend was over, the consequences began to rain down on them. Her parents, mortified beyond measure, cut them off completely. The unofficial Henderson Family Bank, which had apparently been subsidizing their lifestyle even more than I was officially closed for business. Worse, Robert, in a fit of rage, called the managing partner at Kevin's financial firm, a man he played golf with, and told him the entire story. By Monday, Kevin was fired. The morality clause in his contract was his undoing. Their social world evaporated overnight. The friends who had rushed to offer sympathy on Tiffany's Facebook post now treated her like a leper. The story, in all its sordid detail, ripped through their affluent community. They were no longer the aspirational, blessed couple. They were grifters who stole from their own kids. The schadenfreude was palpable, even from a distance. Within 3 months, they were forced to put the McMansion on the market. Without my money, without her parents' money, and without Kevin's inflated salary, they couldn't even make the mortgage payment, let alone the property taxes. They had to sell at a loss in a buyer's market, a final, humiliating blow to their ego. During this time, I focused on what truly mattered, Emily and Josh. Through Sarah, I arranged for supervised visitation. I didn't want to keep them from their parents, but I needed to ensure I wasn't put in a position where I could be emotionally manipulated or that the kids would be used as pawns. I picked them up on Saturdays. We didn't go to fancy restaurants or expensive amusement parks. We went to my workshop. I showed them the beauty of making something real. We built birdhouses, a wobbly but functional bookshelf for Josh's room, and a small jewelry box for Emily. I let them get sawdust on their clothes and a little bit of paint on their hands. I told them stories about their grandmother Mary, about the hardware store, about a life built on principles that had nothing to do with brand names or bank accounts. I was giving them back a piece of their legacy, the part their parents had tried to sell off. 6 months after that Thanksgiving dinner, I sold my house. It was too big, too full of ghosts. I bought a comfortable, modern condo with none of the upkeep and all of the freedom. And with the profits, I finally did what Mary and I had always dreamed of doing. I bought a vintage Airstream trailer, a beautiful silver gleaming machine from 1978. I spent a month restoring it, my hands finding comfort in the familiar work of sanding, polishing, and fixing. My story ends here, but my life is just beginning. I'm writing this from a collapsible table set up just outside my Airstream. I'm parked at a campsite on the edge of the north rim of the Grand Canyon. The sun is setting, painting the canyon walls in shades of orange and purple so beautiful it makes your chest ache. My coffee is hot, the air is clean, and the only sound is the whisper of the wind through the pine trees. I'm not a bitter man. The demolition is complete. Kevin and Tiffany are living in a small, rented townhouse somewhere, trying to rebuild their lives from the ground up. I hope for my grandchildren's sake that they learn something from it all, but their story is no longer my concern. On the small dashboard of my truck, I have a picture of Emily and Josh, taken last week. They're standing in front of the first birdhouse we built, huge, proud smiles on their faces. Their new trust fund, the one I created, is safe and growing, a quiet promise for their future. I did right by them. I did right by Mary. I take a sip of my coffee and look out at the vast, magnificent canyon. I used to think wealth was about the number in your bank account, a foundation you could build for others. But I was wrong. True wealth is this: a quiet conscience, a job well done, and a wide-open road ahead. And the taste of it is sweeter than any revenge. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content. Share your thoughts on what happened in the comments below. To listen to the next story, click on the video appearing on your screen now.